I think. Now we can have our Senator Cotton coming up. We can have that Ivy League debate that you referred to, Senator Cotton, with Mr. Cordery.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director, for appearing before us. I want to return to a topic that Senator Corker touched upon, affordable housing. Census and HUD data indicates that there may not be a single county in this country that currently has enough affordable housing. This is particularly acute in the kind of rural state that I represent, or rural county where I live. There are not a lot of new single-family homes being built. There's not a large stock of multifamily rental units, which is why many families find manufactured housing to be the most affordable option they have, as Senator Corker described. You know, they end up paying less on a mortgage for a manufactured home than they would pay for a very limited supply of rental stock. And as you described, there's a basic math problem. It takes a certain amount of time and resources to process any loan, whether the loan is $40,000 or $400,000 or $4 million. And over a bigger loan, that cost is spread out across a bigger base, and therefore the percentage costs don't appear to be as high. Over a smaller loan, like you have for manufactured housing, it's a much smaller base to spread out, so it appears to be much higher, even though that's the preference of the consumer, and you have many financial institutions who are willing to make those loans. You have regulatory flexibility under the Dodd-Frank Act, under Section 1431, to address this, to raise those percentage rates, yet you haven't used that yet. Could you explain why you haven't used that, and maybe if you're looking ahead to using it to grant some relief for these families and lenders?
Yeah, we did consider this and pretty carefully with a lot of input at the time we adopted our mortgage rules, our big set of mortgage rules in 2013. And this issue was raised, and the 3% was not seen as appropriate for loans under $100,000. And it went to 4 at certain levels, it went to 5 at lower levels, and went to a dollar figure at the lowest levels. Now, that was an effort to try to address the issue that you're raising that I see as a very legitimate issue. Whether we've got those numbers right, whether we should reconsider them and think further about them, just as we've reconsidered and thought further about the rural and underserved issue, is a fair point, and it's one that I will take back from this hearing. I do remain concerned that credit at the smaller, at the lower end dollar end of the spectrum is tight. It is tight. It's tight for people who also often have lower credit scores and more difficult to access the credit. I don't want to try to pretend to redo underwriting that's being done by these institutions on that. But whether those numbers are set at the right level, whether 100,000 is the right level, are things that I'm not entirely clear on. And I think we should be looking at some more. You should be looking at some more. We should have a fruitful discourse on whether there maybe should be changes there.
Well, thank you for that. And you referenced in your answers to Senator Corker that you have seen some encouraging data, which I've seen as well. I do think that's, though, limited to the sale of new manufactured housing. I believe that...
I see. Is the used manufactured?
So, yes, there is still a robust market, but also for refinancing and for secondary sales. Manufactured housing obviously doesn't have the same lifetime that single-family housing does. But oftentimes families need manufactured housing at a time in their life when they're going through a lot of change, when they're newly married, when they have new children. They're also going through economic change, hopefully getting higher wages, moving up the economic ladder, and ready to move into a different kind of home when there's another family who'd be willing to buy their manufactured home.
That's okay.
Director, I'd like to turn to another question now. Last year, you brought an enforcement action against a mortgage lender, PHH. You didn't file a lawsuit. You went in front of an administrative law judge, and that judge ruled for the CFPB and issued a judgment of $6.4 million. You overturned that judgment and imposed a fine of $109 million. Could you explain your thinking, both why you pursued an administrative law judge as opposed to an Article III court, and then what evidence and thinking went into your decision to overturn your own LJ and impose a fine 17 times his initial judgment?
Yeah. So the use of an administrative law judge as opposed to a court is, under the statute, is a discretionary decision. We've used administrative law judges fairly sparingly, except for consent orders. We've been in court, and we are in court in many, many matters. One difference is that the ALJ route can be faster and can be more streamlined. Whether it's a good or bad thing is often in the eye of the beholder. That is happened to be the approach that was used in this particular matter. As for the decision, that decision is published, and the reasons for it are set out on their face. I think it was like maybe a 36-page decision, so it's lengthy. The particular point that you're getting at had to do with whether under the law, and this is not an obvious point, and the administrative law judge saw it one way, I saw it another way. Maybe a court will see it a different way. We'll see. Under the law, whether if you violate the RESPA statute, is the right relief only contracts that violated the RESPA statute after a certain date, or is it payments made after a certain date on contracts that violated the RESPA statute but were before that day? It has to do with the limitations period here. Not an obvious point, but it's a point that once you decide it one way or the other, makes a huge difference in this matter in terms of the amount of relief. That is the sole reason for it. I thought the law pretty clearly was one way. Others may see it differently, but we tried to come to the right result as we understood the law.
Thank you for that explanation, Director. You're right that the implication of my question, the concern I'm driving at, is not necessarily even about that specific decision, but just about the structure of decision-making.
Yep.
Not only within your own bureau, but within independent agencies as a whole. Your own bureau has certain features that exacerbates the problem, the fact that your budget is not subject to annual appropriations and that you're a single director as opposed to a 5-member commission. This is not a reflection on you or any future director. These are concerns I have about the nature of this bureau. Madison said in Federalist 47 that the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary in the same hands may very justly be pronounced the definition of tyranny. So independent of your judgment in this single case or in any other case or future director's judgments, I'm going to continue to have these concerns about the bureau.
That's fine. And having said that, I'm here in front of you here and consistently and happy to be speaking to you anytime. I regard that legislative oversight as very meaningful and very vigorous. That decision is subject to appeal. It is being appealed to a court. I hope that they will see the case the same way I did and think that I did things right. If they disagree, they'll tell us so, and we'll comply and abide by that ruling. So we are subject to judicial review in that respect as well.
And we're glad to have you here, and we're glad to have judicial review, but original fact finders without life tenure and salary protections are different from fact finders at agencies and bureaus, not just yours.
True, although state court judges are not subject to life tenure as well, yeah.
Or regulators issuing rules that provide standards of conduct under which the force of law can impose penalties who are not elected are different from people up here making those when we have to answer to people that we serve back home for the wisdom of those rules.
Fair enough.
Not a specific commentary on this
Yep.
particular case or any particular thing you've done, but I have real reservations about the structure of this bureau.
Okay.